What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of JRAM Joyrides, and today we're going to be installing all of this. For the front, we've got some adjustable upper control arms, we've got some aftermarket lower control arms. For the rear, we've got some adjustable uppers and some aftermarket lower control arms. And then we've got the subframe brace and the lower tie bar, and of course coilovers for the front and the rear. So I'm going to focus on replacing the parts I have for the front suspension, because I already have the spindles off from the last video where I replaced the lower ball joints, and I did that in preparation for the suspension. I wanted roll center adjuster ball joints, but they're a little pricey and the budget doesn't call for it at this moment, so I'll circle back around to that at a later date. But I at least wanted some fresh ball joints, so I know those are good to go. But we're going to be putting on a coilover, we're going to be replacing this lower control arm and this upper control arm, so we need to unbolt everything to get those off. Let's do it. Alright, so I feel like taking off the upper control arms first. And to do that, I gotta take this nut off and this one that's hiding in here. To get to this one, I'm gonna have to remove this bracket. It's a little 10 mil. All right, zip these off real quick. They're out. Come down here. You know what? Damn, I forgot these control arms have this other little arm going across, so we're actually gonna have to take out the strut assembly first, which is fine. We'll just leave it hanging like that for now, and this should be relatively simple too. We just gotta take off this bottom bolts, and then we are gonna be using this fork for the coilover, so we need to take that bolt off. If you don't have power tools, I would probably just take this one off while it's still attached to the car, so you're not fighting it. And then of course these two nuts, you don't have to worry about that, just these. Must be a 15. Yes sir. Set those up here for now. Probably gonna reuse those. Let's see what size this is. I think it's a 14. Those are probably 17s. Where did I put my 17? There she is. So for this bottom one, it's a bolt and a nut on the other side. I am going to attempt to just zip the nut off with the impact, but if you don't have an impact, you know, just get your wrench on the nut and then a ratchet on the bolt and just hold it while you back out that bolt. Spinning freely, so I am going to have to put something on that side, which is fine. Is no problem. Alright. You can use your wrench as leverage to help you push that bolt out, and she's out. Group them together so you don't forget that they go together. And then this one is a 14. I'm just going to zip this one off. She's out. Let me turn on this light right here. That might help. Alright. Two are out. I think we have almost everything out. But keep in mind, I gotta remove this brake caliper off of the strut assembly because we don't want it hanging on there when we pull it off. Look, it already wants to come out. This is gonna be tricky. Let's see if this little hole right here works. Good enough. What I did forget though is I do need to take this 10mm off of the strut assembly. That's a 12mm. That's off, set it off to the side. Damn. That's no good. Didn't really stretch the line though. Don't really have a better place to hang this, but actually, I lied. We're gonna hang it right on that motor mount. Perfect. All right, I just pulled that down. Rotate it out like that. Control arm is off. And strut assembly is now off. I'm gonna go grab the new part. This, I'm gonna grab this too because we're gonna put this on as well. And then it doesn't matter what side these go on, but these are for the front. Gotta pull the fork off the old strut. Alright, we recovered some battery life. We got the strut assembly off and the upper control arm. And now we just gotta get this lower control arm off. Did some research while the battery was charging. This is an 18, this is a 15, and this is a 17, the one back here. Let's go ahead and get this one off. It's a 3/8 ratchet for this socket. I guess it probably would have been a good idea to loosen that up while everything was still bolted in, but you know, what do they say? Hindsight is 20/20. Something like that. Hopefully y'all can see that. Man, I should probably PB blast that, but I think I'm just gonna grab my trusty impact. Boom, just like that. What was I thinking? Alright, 15 mil for this one. Hopefully it doesn't give me the same kind of trouble, because I don't really have room to fit an impact. Hopefully y'all can see that. Alright, the last one is right here, and that is a 17. Oh, that one was so easy. Perfect. Now, the only thing I'm not 100% sure about is this little guy right here. That's a stud coming out of this other control arm piece. It's like a two-piece lower control arm setup. Haven't really seen that before. It's usually just one whole piece, but who am I to question Honda's engineering? Oh, look at that. They knew what they were doing. She's off. Alright. We've got the old strut assembly with the new coilover. I already transferred the fork over. I mean, you can already tell that there's, with this height adjustment, which is how I bought them, it's probably about 2.5 inches. So we'll see how that affects the ride height. I don't think I'm going to make any height adjustments off the car to the coilovers. I'm just going to throw them on like this. At least the preload is good to go. And I'll just mess with the ride height later. But yeah, now we can start getting all these parts on. So I'm just going to do it in reverse order and get this new to me lower control arm on. Not in perfect condition, but It's a budget build. Now we'll see how easily these parts do or don't go in, but I'm gonna slide it on that stud. Yeah, I'm probably just gonna have to tap it in there. Hey, hey, hey. That's what I'm talking about. Alright, that one started in. Now let's attempt to line up this one. Might have some trouble with this one. The sway bar is attached to this control arm back here to the second half. I could unbolt it to make my life easier, but I want problems. And I'm lazy right now. I'm gonna get the jack up under that control arm. Just give it a little bit, and boom. Looks pretty lined up in there to me, so now I can see if that bolt will thread in. There we go. Forgot that's a 15. Alright, that bolt's in there. Let's get this nut on there. Boom. Take the jack off. Ah. Alright. I'm going to go back over to our rear bolt over here. I don't know where to put the camera. Let's get the electric ratchet in here, huh? Well, we've got a problem. I thought that bolt was lined up, and it is not. I'll get the jack up in here, and we're just gonna push up on that. Maybe that'll help out. Alright, finally got that bolt to line up. Didn't do anything special to make it happen. Just needed to finesse it a little bit, but she's good to go. Fuck, I backed it out. Alright, I got that one tightened. Not all the way. I'll tighten the rest of it by hand. I'm trying to find my 15mm deep socket. Dealing with that just, oh, it's right here. Ah, funny. tighten this one up now. Down nice and tight. I'm gonna go ahead and tighten up that rear one too. Actually, I lied. I'm gonna keep that one just a little loose, and then I'm gonna loosen this one back up. Actually, well, yeah, let's do it. Why not? I don't think this one's gonna matter too much because it doesn't have any kind of bushing in it. But we are gonna leave that one loose. And the reason for that is because we need to preload it. So we gotta apply some pressure to the control arm before we actually tighten that up all the way. It's just out of view, but I'm tightening up this front nut. Since I already have my jack here. See how I'm jacking up the arm just a little bit. Put some tension on it. Tighten everything up. I do not know the torque specs. I'm just going to make sure it's nice and tight, but not overly tight. You kind of get a feel for it over time as you work on cars more. You just get that feeling. You're like, yeah, that should be good enough. That should be good enough. Now I'm going to tighten this one up. That is the 18. Good to go. Alright, we've got the lower control arm situated. Now I gotta get this upper control arm on. They've already got some camber set here. I'm gonna leave it as is, and I will also mess with this later. But for now, we're gonna feed this up here, up through those holes. And I'm gonna go up top and just put the nuts up there, just so it doesn't fall out. It's actually not even poking through the top yet. Man. Should be poking to the top. Yes, sir. We're not going to tighten anything down all the way yet. We're just going to get what we got to get on top. Alright, those are on. Control arm is up. Now, let's get this bad boy in there. Make sure we move the axle back this way because it's got the fork's got to go right over it. Just gonna try to wiggle it on there. I'm gonna have to do this off camera real quick because I need both hands for this. All right, I managed to slip the fork back over the axle on the control arm. Now I just gotta get this up through the center of the control arm, which I have done. And I gotta line up the bottom fork with the bushing on the lower control arm. So let's see if we can do that. this harder for myself, but we're gonna get it on there. Get that top nut secured for the coilover. Very lightly. Let's try this again. Come on now. I'm just going to jack up on the outer, this side of the fork. Since this just needs to come up ever so slightly. Look at that. She's in there, baby. Get that nut on there. Make sure it's tight. Ain't going nowhere. I'm gonna bring the jack back over here to jack up on the lower control arm because we need to tighten the bolt on this fork. But I'm gonna grab my light. As you can tell, there's a gap, and we need to close that gap. There we go. Gap closed. 14. We're gonna call that good. All right, lower control arm is on and tightened down. The coilover is on and tightened down on the fork and the back of the fork. Now we just gotta tighten the bolts on the top for the coilover and the control arm. Sorry, I don't have my head mount on right now because the battery has been running low on the GoPro, so I have it hooked up to an external battery. This is the GoPro Hero 11 Black Mini, so the battery is non-removable, which is why I have to have the external battery source. Alright, we just gotta tighten up those bolts for the coilover. Yes, sir. And they're on. Last thing I'm gonna do is get my knuckle back on. Kept them off from the last video, and this is why I waited. Needed to put all this stuff on before I put that back on, or I would have just had to take it all apart again. So yeah. Alright, everything is back together on this side. I got my spindle assembly back on, brake calipers back on, brake lines bolted back onto the spindle, and yeah, everything's tightened down. I'm going to do the other side on the front, but I'm not going to record because it's the same process as this side, hopefully with less mistakes made along the way, now that I've learned my lesson on this side. and we've got the whole rear to do still, so we'll continue once I have the other side on in the front. Alright y'all, it is a new day. I was only able to get the front suspension components on the other day, so today we're tackling the back half to include all these parts. Let's get started. Alright, so on the rear, I'm going to be replacing the lower control arm, the upper control arm, the strut assembly with the coilover, and the subframe brace, and possibly that lower tie bar, but we'll see. So let me show you what we got to do under the car before we start putting these on. Alright, so before we get started under the car, I'm going to come here in the trunk and take the two nuts off for these strut assemblies, because we're going to end up taking those out. Got my 3/8 ratchet, and these are 14mm nuts. I have to break that loose with a ratchet first. Ratchet. I'll set these down there. Other side. I'll see if they break loose. Nope. Nope. Man, those are on there good. I might need two hands. Alright, broke those loose. Off. When you're trying to access these, obviously they're hidden behind these inserts for the trunk. My trunk's kind of incomplete, so I was able to just peel them back, but definitely got to remove a few clips. And then on the driver's side, there's this light. Just make sure you take the plug out, which is right over here. You don't want to rip that, so just be careful when you're doing this side. And now we can get under the car. Alright, so moving under the car here, I'm just going to focus on the pretty much everything except the rear upper control arms for now. I'll get to those last. But to remove these, we're going to have to take off this bolt, which is actually through the other side here, and then this bolt over here. And I believe they are all 14mm. Yep. So we'll go ahead and get those off real quick. Alright, let's go ahead and zip these off real quick. Alright, those are off, so the control arm should just come right out. Alright, let's see if this control arm just drops right out. Nice. I kind of knew that would happen because I took the top bolts out. Yeah, I feel like that bushing is pretty torn up in there. This one's not too great either. This one's alright. But yeah, these two outer bushings have really taken a beating, so let's go ahead and zip the other side off real quick. Alright, if y'all haven't noticed, my trim for the Delsol does not have a factory rear sway bar, which kind of makes my job easier, but I don't get the benefits of a rear sway bar. So if you do have a rear sway bar on yours, there should be two additional bolts here. It's like a collar that's going over the sway bar, so it should be 2 bolts here and an extra 2 bolts here. And then on your lower control arm, I believe there's another hole where you unbolt the link. Alright, so we're going to get this subframe brace on. This side is going to be facing the back of the car, because if you flip it over, this side's got some kind of brackets, and those are going to be facing toward the front of the car because, man, those brackets essentially fill in these gaps here. Not gaps, but, you know, it's not a flat surface So those brackets pretty much fit perfectly on this uneven surface. It only goes on one way, so you can't mess it up, but I thought I would show you. So it's gonna sit up on there kind of like this, and all those holes should line up. But to get that up on there, we have these little brackets, and there's one for each side, but this one is for the passenger side. So this, we had to take the lower control arms because we're replacing them anyway, but if you were just putting a subframe brace, you would still have to remove the lower control arm, or at least 2 bolts enough to swing the arm down, because this bracket is going in here. And I don't know if you can tell, but this bracket, this little flat side, and this open-ended face right here, those are going to be facing toward the back. And essentially those welded nuts are going to fill in the spaces on this bracket, and it should sit just like that. So we take it off, weld nuts, that side faces the back of the car, and it sits right over it like that. And you put the subframe brace and you just send the bolts through, and that's what sandwiches on there. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so let's get the subframe brace up there. Actually, before I do that, these holes already have threads in them, so we'll just get the bracket up here, and then we're going to grab this bolt, send it through the top hole and get it lined up, and then I'll grab the I'm going to send that one to the bottom. It don't really matter, but basically just line those bolts up with those threaded holes that are already on the car. So that side is being hooked up, and then I'm going to get these on real quick. Hard to tell, but line them up with those 2 bolts. They're lined up, and you just send the bolts through. I think those are 12s, maybe 13s. So my bolts aren't all the same size for the head of the bolt, just because I bought this on Marketplace and I was missing 1 bolt. So luckily I already had the exact kind of bolt that I needed sitting in the garage, but that one has a 13mm head and the rest of my bolts are 12mm. Let's go ahead and tighten them down a little bit. I'm not going to go all the way in because I still got to get this plate back there. This plate, the top portion is threaded, so this top bolt will end up threading through here, but this bottom one has no threads. So what's going to happen is the bolt's going to go all the way through the back, and I've got, if you buy this kit brand new, it should come with all the hardware you need, but there'll be a nut. I don't really have a flange nut on hand, so I'm using a nut with a split lock washer and a flat washer just to make sure it stays in place. But you don't need all that if you've got a flange nut supplied with the kit. So I'm going to go back here. Can't really see what I'm doing. But that's how it should be sitting. I'm gonna get my nut on the back side for that bottom bolt that I just sent through. Lost the lock washer. Well, it doesn't look like I have a whole lot of threads, so it might actually just be safer to just put the nut on there for now. I might go back and buy some slightly longer bolts, but that should be fine. Got the nut on there. And I'm going to move on to the other side. Show y'all how I'm lining it up one more time. Bottom hole is going to go right over the bolt that I sent through, and it's just going to sit in there just like that. I'm going to put a nut on there, and then we'll send this top bolt through, and it should come out the threads on the top of this little bracket. Oops. Grab the nut. Ay, ay, ay. Alright, that's on. We'll get everything tightened down for those 4 bolts. If you want to be extra safe or precautious, you can put some Loctite on there. I forget which one is the less permanent Loctite. I think it's the blue. Probably fine with some Loctite blue if that's the lower strength. I'm not putting any of that on there though. I'm just gonna run it like that. Top bolt already threaded. There's no nut on the back side for it, so that one we can just tighten it down, make sure it's snug, nice and tight. And then this bottom one is the one that has that nut, so I think it's a 13, at least for the nut that I'm using. It is. So I'm just going to hold that 13 on there and tighten it up. Actually, this bolt is already threaded through the threads that are on the body of the car already. So all you gotta do is come back here and tighten up the nut. And that will tighten up this bracket. Alright, I didn't show it, but I actually ended up taking the nut back off, and I at least put the flat washer on because I didn't like the way the nut was tightening down on the bracket. So the washer kind of more evenly distributes that pressure that it's putting on it when you tighten it down, so I'm definitely a lot more comfortable with that. Let's go ahead and do the other side. Cool. Double check this one more time. Solid. It's a little after the fact, but before you fully tighten those bolts down, you should definitely make sure that you have these holes lined up right here, because if not, you're not gonna be able to get the bolt through for your lower control arm. I found that out immediately after tightening the bolts down, so I had to loosen them back up, but now everything's lined up. So let me grab a control arm. Alright, so I actually grabbed a coilover and a control arm because I gotta get this up in there first before I put the control arm on. So I'm just gonna slide it up and then put the 2 nuts on top just so it's hanging there, and then we'll get the control arm on. Alright, now that we got the coilover sitting in there, we can get the lower control arm. It's gonna sit like that, the 2 bushings toward the outside, the one by itself on the inside. That's hand threaded in there. And now we can line up these outer two bolts and get those sent through. Nice and lined up. Alright. For this middle one, what I'm going to have to do is kind of put the jack underneath and get it jacked up so I can line this up and send the bolt through there. And all the bolts will be lined up after that. There we go. I'm trying to make some good content for y'all, but they don't show you all the little problems you run into in a lot of videos. They just make it seem so easy, but it doesn't always work out that way. So I'm just trying to provide a realistic experience here. Trying to make it go by smooth, but it never seems to want to go that way. Alright, the back bolt is in. I'm just going to lower the jack a little bit so the bolt lines up with the threads here, and we'll have everything hand threaded in for this part. Alright, I'm going to tighten these down before we do the final tightening of everything we've been working on under the car. Gonna use my hand torque wrench to make sure these are tight enough. Feels good. And that feels good. Check this one more time. And that's good. Alright. So, did kind of jack this back up a little bit, but I'm gonna give it just a little bit more. And basically we're doing this because we want to preload the suspension before we tighten all the bolts against all these bushings. So now that we've got some pressure on it, we'll go ahead and tighten it up. Check that again by hand. Get this one over here. I don't know. Okay, I'm back. Unfortunately, I stripped the bolt. That was one of the bolts that's supposed to go in here and through the control arm. And the reason that happened, which I didn't realize, is because the thread pitch for these bolts was incorrect. It's my fault for not double checking, but I did go to Home Depot and I got some new bolts with the correct thread pitch. But another dilemma I ran into is these bolts are supposed to, when you run them through, they're recessed in this hole right here, right? So this is the bolt that came with the kit when I bought it. Smaller bolt head, so you can still fit a socket over it even when it's inside this hole. This new one, however, is a lot bigger, and there's no way I'm going to fit a socket on that once it gets passed into that hole. So everything's just messed up all the way around. And this is a class 8.8. I need a class 10.9 or a grade 8 bolt, but I'm really just putting these bolts in so that I can order the correct bolts. So I'm gonna make this work for now, but since I won't be able to tighten the bolt any further once it gets inside this hole, what I'm gonna do is just put the tie bar on, run it through this way, and tighten it down, and that should be fine for now. I don't plan on driving the car until this is fixed, pretty much. So, but this is just to get my car back on the ground because I can't leave it up in the air. So alright, and last but not least, I'm going to replace these upper control arms. So you've got two 14mm bolts holding it to the chassis and one 14mm bolt holding it to the trailing arm, so I'm going to go ahead and get those off. Easy day. Alright, so I've got the old upper control arm and the new rear upper control arm. This one is adjustable, and I pretty much just eyeballed it. It's pretty even to me, so I'm just going to install it like that. Okay. Got my little ghetto light because I do not know where I put my magnetic light. Probably left it on something. We're just gonna hand thread these in. And then come on. I'm over it for today. I can't find anything. Nothing's going right today. Alright, I found my 14 mil. Alright, those are hand threaded. And let's get this last 14 mil in there. There we go. And we're going to send those back in. Check on this one. Alright, that's on. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Alright, y'all. I think I'm pretty much wrapped up with the rear suspension back here. On this side, this was the first bolt I sent through for the subframe brace back here. I didn't know what the bolts that were supplied to me when I bought it, they weren't the correct thread pitch, and I should have double checked before I started sending the bolts in, but I did not. So I ended up stripping the welded in nut right here. So as you can see, I had to get a longer bolt, still a class 10.9, so it's still a quality bolt. I had to order it online, but it's still a little too long, so I'm gonna have to come back and mess with this at a later time. But this will work for now. I just had to drill out the hole, fit this bolt through, and then just put a nut on the back side. But my OCD is telling me to fix that at some point, and I will. But this side was fine. I didn't strip anything. I learned my lesson on that side. But yeah, all the suspension's on. The front lower control arms, the front upper control arms, the coilovers in the front and the rear adjustable uppers, and then the rear lower control arms and the subframe brace. Yeah, I'm excited for my next video, but I guess you guys will see that when I get to it. As always, thank you guys for watching. Please drop a like, comment, subscribe. I appreciate you guys following the journey, and I'm excited for what I got coming up next. J-Ram out.